So today we're going to look at the last two teams in MLS to have yet to taste a defeat, and that of course is the Seattle Sounder and Nashville SC. And since we are now 1/5 into the MLS season, usually this is kind of the time where most, if not every single MLS team have suffered at least one defeat into the season, and that of course is the case for the other 25 MLS franchise that they have at least lost one so far this season. But these two teams are the last man standing in terms of the unbeaten record, and you could even say that these two teams are the last man standing in their respective conference, because the Seattle Sounder is the only team in the Western Conference to have yet to suffer a defeat, and Nashville SC is the only team in the Eastern Conference to yet to suffer a defeat. And in the beginning of the season, if you would have thought that both of these teams are the last two teams standing in terms of the unbeaten record, I don't think a lot of people would have believed you. I mean, I know the Seattle Sounders did make it to MLS Cup last season, but many, including myself, thought that this was supposed to be a regressional year, especially with some of the big pieces that they lost this offseason and also some injuries that they've been dealing with coming into this season. Not many people thought that the Sounders were going to keep up the rate that they've been excellent for the past couple of years, and yet for the first 6 games of the season, they not only have kept up the rate that they've been an unstoppable force for the past couple of years, but I think they have even got better with the incredible start that they had in the beginning of the year, and now currently leads the Supporters Shield standing and has the best record in MLS. Whereas for Nashville SC, I not only think that nobody thought that this team would be still unbeaten after their 7 weeks into the MLS season, but I didn't think that they would be unbeaten, especially the way that they look in the first couple of games, where they definitely looked like they were beatable. I mean, you got to remember, this was the team that went down 2-0 in their first 2 games, and both times they were able to rescue a point out of those games. And then, I also kind of feel like, with this Nashville team, the reason why they're still unbeaten is kind of just a combination of the resiliency that they have shown, because I think 3 times this season where they went down 2-0, and all 3 times they've been able to rescue a draw out of those games. But they also have shown not only that resiliency, but also that kind of toughness in terms of defense that they shown last season, where they're just going to make a living hell for opposition to try to break them down. And we'll see how a lot of these teams are having trouble in terms of scoring against Nashville SC, but also they've been able to find just enough going forward on the attack to basically score the goals to get off all 3 points. Now, that being said, they are also kind of known as the draw king of MLS, because they have the league leaders draws this season. And there's no doubt, when you look at these two unbeaten teams and you tell me who exactly is the one that is the better unbeaten team, it's got to be the Seattle Sounders. And we're going to look at the Seattle Sounders first, of why they're definitely the better unbeaten team. And again, they're no doubt right now it is the best team in the league, with a record of 5-3-0. They scored 14 goals this season and only have given up 3 goals this season. And keep in mind, all 3 of those goals that they gave up this season has not came into open play. 2 of them was on a free kick, 1 of them was in the spot. So the fact that they are now 8 games in the season and they have yet to concede a goal in open play, I mean, I think that's got to be a record in terms of a team to start a season to not concede an open play 8 games into it. I mean, it just shows you how not only this Sounders team is such a good team, but this is a team that is getting really hard to or if you're in opposition, is a team that is really hard to score against them. And that's something we haven't seen in past Sounders team, where even with some of these best Sounders team in the past, we have not seen such a defensive kind of structure and just such an unstoppable kind of lockdown defense as we've seen this season with the Sounders, who have yet to concede a goal in open play this season. And they have a goal differential of +11, which I believe that also is the best goal differential in the league. Now, in the first game of the season, they definitely start the season with a bang by winning 4-0 against Minnesota United. And then the very next game, they were able to draw 1-1 against LAFC. And keep in mind, in the first game of the season, that was definitely built up to not only be a marquee game, but a lot of people thought that maybe Minnesota was going to get that revenge for what happened in the Western Conference Final just a couple of months ago. No, instead the Sounders completely blow blow them apart, especially in the second half where they score those four unanswered goals to win 4-0. And then of course they draw 1-1 against LAFC, but that was a game where a lot of people were still believing LAFC was going to be the one that gave them a lot of challenge, but the Sounders were able to draw that game, and in many ways they were kind of unlucky to not win that game, because for a majority part of that game they were actually the better team, and they just couldn't find their finishing in that game is the reason why they only got a 1-1 draw out of that one. But in the very next week, they quickly recover and get a 3-0 win against the Galaxy. And keep in mind, this was a Galaxy team that was in second in the Western Conference, and this was a team that you could also say that could really give the Sounders a big test to see if they can sustain the good start they had. And not only the fact that they answer yes, but they just completely blown the Galaxy out of the window. And then in the very next game against the Portland Timbers, against their hated Cascadia rival, they were able to pull off a 2-1 win against the Timbers. The very next game, which was actually the battle between the top two team in the Western Conference, that's when the Quakes were still relevant, unlike just a couple of weeks later. And as I mentioned in my video on Tuesday, where the Quakes basically just went downhill after this game. But yeah, the Sounders were able to win 1-0 in that one. Then in the very next one, they were able to win 2-0 against LAFC at home. They did draw 1-1 against Atlanta United before drawing 0-0 against Austin FC. And these two games are really kind of the two games where there is started to maybe be a little bit cracks and maybe some vulnerability from this Seattle Sounders side. But that being said, if you're going to have these games where you're going to start to look a little bit vulnerable and you start to draw points at home, do it right before the break. And I feel like this break definitely came at the perfect time for the Sounders, because these last two games, they definitely have not looked as good as they have in their first 6 games, where they looked like they was just an unstoppable force, where no matter what you put against them, they will always find a way to get all 3 points at home. Now, the top goal scored so far this season, unsurprisingly, you got Raul Ruiz with 6 goals this season. I believe he's second on the list in terms of the Golden Boot race. Then you got Brad Smith, who this season is pushed more on an advanced role from that fullback position, scoring 3 goals. Then you got Freddie Montero with 2 goals, and then João Paulo, who scored, or arguably the goal of the season with 1 goal, followed by Christian Rodon also with 1 goal. Top assist leader, you got João Paulo, currently leads that list with 4 assists. He also is pushed more of an advanced role, almost near that same role that Nico Lodeiro basically used to play, and he of course grabbed himself 4 assists, followed by Will Bruin and Alex Verdun with 2 assists. Then you got Jimmy Madrona with 1 assist and Freddie Montero with 1 assist. So yeah, it is pretty clear that when you look at this team, it is definitely kind of an unstoppable team, even though I know in the last 2 games they have started to show some vulnerability, but also because of the fact that they're now coming into these games where they kind of show some vulnerability and they have a little bit of a break to come into it. That's where I say that this break is a perfect time for the Sounders to kind of figure out what has kind of gone wrong in these last 2 games and why they haven't been as sharp as they had in the first 6 games. And I have no doubt that they eventually will figure it out. And once this break is over, they're going to be back at their best and maybe be a team that's going to not only have this unbeaten record, but they probably will have this unbeaten record for a very long time. Now, let's talk about Nashville SC, which, as I said, they are kind of the draw kings of MLS because they have draw the league leads 5 draws, followed by 2 wins and no losses. They scored 9 goals this season and allowed 6 goals this season with a goal differential of +3. As I mentioned, in the first 2 games, they looked like a very vulnerable team. I mean, the first 2 games, they both went down 2-0, but they were able to come back to draw 2-2. But I will also say that those first 2 games, despite the fact that they went down 2-0 very early, they probably should have not only rescued a point out of those games, but probably should have won in that game, because they were just putting the kitchen sink on FC Cincinnati, especially in the second half, but they weren't able to score that crucial 3rd goal. And it's the same case for Montreal, where once they came back from a 2-0 deficit, they were putting the kitchen sink on Montreal, but aren't able to get that crucial third goal to get all 3 points in that game. But then the very next game where they were facing against an Inter Miami side that was kind of injury riddled, and in some way this was kind of the same Inter Miami side that they were facing in the playoffs last season, which was a very short-handed Miami side, and they drew 0-0 in that game. And that was the game that I even said that there was some doubts that I'm starting to have with this Nashville SC side, and maybe this is just a case where Nashville SC is suffering from that sophomore slump because, 3 games into the season and 3 games at home, they've dropped points in all 3 of those games. And as I mentioned before, if you want to be a team to make it to the playoffs, you cannot afford to drop that many points at home and just keep getting draws at home. Now, in the very next game, they finally got that crucial show 3 points that they've been looking for, and probably maybe the most impressive victory that they have this season by taking down the New England Revolution. And keep in mind, New England, they're currently at the top of the Eastern Conference right now, and a lot of people are saying that they're right now the best team in the East. So the fact that they were able to take them down at that point and win 2-0 against New England, that is just got to be one of, if not the most impressive victory that Nashville SC has had this season. But again, that was a victory that they desperately needed, knowing the fact that if they would have draw again, or if they lose that game, they would be winless in the first 4 games, and there would definitely be a lot of question that, yeah, if you go your first 4 game winless, and the fact that your first 4 game is at home, how are you going to try to recover that and potentially maybe find yourself to dig out of the hole in these next couple of games? And I talk about Nashville SC, especially with the way that their schedule is, and it's very home heavy in the first half of the season. It is very important for this team to get off to a good start, and the fact that they could have been 0-2 or 0-3-1 up to that point, there would definitely a lot of concern if you are a Nashville SC fan. But they got that crucial victory to get their record to 1-3-0. Now, in the very next game, they went back to their old drawing habits, but they did go on the road for this one against RSL, and they were able to get a gritty 0-0 draw out of that game. And then the very next game against Austin FC, they were able to kind of show what they have done in the past. And in fact, I think that 0-0 draw against RSL is also a great example of what kind of is something that they did last season under Gary Smith, which is a team that, whenever they go on the road, they know that they just need to stay compact and maybe hope to see they might get an opportunity on the counter. And if they can, of course, lock down a 0-0 draw, it is going to be a good result. Now, they kind of did the same thing against Austin FC, but this time they were able to get that crucial goal when they tried to go on the attack and look a little bit optimistic and get all 3 points out of that game to pretty much improve the record to 2-4-0. But then the very next game against Atlanta United, and I really thought this was it. Like, this was the game I thought that their unbeaten record was going to go up in flames, because they were down 2-0 against Atlanta United. And this is not like the 2-0 what we saw early this season from Nashville, where they had time to recover after going down 2-0 in the first 10 or 15 minutes into the game, or in this case the first half of the game. But this was a 2-0 deficit that they were facing all the way up to the last 11 minutes of this game, and yet 2 quick goals scored by Hani Mukhtar was the reason why they were able to rescue a miraculous draw out of Atlanta on the road. And therefore, that's why they're, alongside the Seattle Sounders, are the only 2 teams to have yet to taste defeat this season. Now, for Nashville SC, in terms of their top goal scored, I mean, when you look at the top goal scored and also on the top assist leader, you can clearly see that this team does not really have that one specific individual that is going to be a difference maker, but instead it's kind of a team effort in terms of how they, of course, score the goals, and how they, of course, assist the goal, where many of these players are contributing in both on the goal scoring front and also in the assist front. So in the goal scoring front, you got Hani Mukhtar, of course, leading the team with 3 goals, but prior to those 2 goals that he scored against Atlanta, he probably wasn't even the top goal scorer on this team. In fact, it would have been Hyundai Katnitz with 2 assists, followed by Randall Leao, or or Cadiz with 2 goals, and Randall Leao with 2 goals. And then you have a bunch of players that, of course, score 1 goal this season. Two of those players are CJ Sapon and Alex Mule with 1 goal this year. Top assist leader, again, it's not really a team that has a specific guy that is going to be the one that is going to be the playmaker of this team, and instead it's just kind of a team effort in terms of contributing assists. Anibal Godoy, Randall Leao, and Daniel Lovitz with 2 assists. For Nashville fan, you can pretty much thank the San Jose Earthquakes in terms of receiving Anibal Godoy, and this is also another example of what happened when Quakes player leave the team for another MLS team, and they tend to do much better with them. Now, obviously, it's not always the case, and Austin FC fans are probably try to rebuttal my argument by saying, you said before that all those Quakes player that leaves the Quakes to another team is going to instantly better, but right now we have guys like Danny Houston, who hasn't scored a single goals this season, and Nick Lima hasn't really looked impressive, so you must be kind of telling a lie. Well, again, not always the case where former Quakes player that goes to another team that usually do well instantly, but most of the time it is, of course, the case. And I really think Anibal Godoy, during his time with Nashville, not only he's been playing much better than his time with the Quakes, but he has been one of their more important player, especially on that defensive end. And this season he's definitely added to the playmaking as one of his strengths, as he, of course, is one of the players that has 2 assists this season, followed by Randall Leao and Daniel Lovitz. And then you have a bunch of guys that currently have 1 assist. 2 of those players, Adam Baji with 1 assist, and Jonah Cadiz with also 1 assist. Now, before I, of course, end this video, I just want to kind of talk about how, when you look at these two teams, and if you would have asked me who exactly most likely is going to be that last team standing in terms of having the unbeaten record, well, since Nashville, I think they played first when the break is, when this mini MLS break is going to be over, they most likely could be the one that has their unbeaten run gone up to flames, because I think the next game they play against the Red Bulls, and keep in mind the Red Bulls this season, besides that loss that they suffer against SKC, they have yet to lose this season against any away team when they're playing at home, and they already took out one of the team that was unbeaten prior to the break, which was Orlando City, so they could do the same thing with Nashville SC. But overall, even with the schedule wise, I feel like most likely the Sounders are the one that is going to be the last man standings, and it's not because of the fact that I don't think Nashville is that good. I think they're a very decent team, where, again, this is a team that they fight every inch, and they're a team that not only show that resiliency, but also just makes a living hell for you to try to break them down. If you get a win against Nashville SC, you definitely have earned that win. But really, I just feel like the Sounders overall, when you look at the way that they're built up, and I just feel like this team, it's gonna be kind of an unstoppable force in these next couple of weeks. Now, also keep in mind, since we are heading into this stretch of the season where there's a lot of international competition that is going on, and also there are going to be some players that is on international break, that might be the case for the Sounders, where maybe they're going to miss a couple of guys for international break. Now, today, I have heard that Raul Ruidiaz has been dropped from that Peru national team, which I think that's great news if you are a Seattle Sounders fan, because no doubt he is the most important player on your attack, and that was kind of one of the big concern heading into the summer of, they don't have Ruidiaz. Who exactly is going to be the guy that will pick up the goal scoring chart? But the fact that they're now going to have him, that also kind of boosted my argument that, I just think the Sounders are probably going to be the one that are more fit to be a team that can continue this unbeaten run. And if you also look at schedule-wise, I think Nashville does have a pretty tough schedule, especially with the way that, as I mentioned, with them having so much home games to start the beginning of the season, you know that they're going to start to have a ton of games that is going to be on the road. And so far on the road, they play two teams on the road that, I wouldn't say they're bad team. I mean, when they play against RSL on the road, that was when RSL was still a decent team and they were able to get 0-0 draw out of that. And then, of course, against Atlanta, if they didn't show that resiliency, able to score those two late goals, they would have suffered their first loss that season. And that I think that is something that I think Nashville just cannot keep relying on, where they've get themselves in a hole, find themselves down 2-0, and expect to always come back to get a 2-2 draw. Like that's just not sustainable. So in terms of schedule wise, I think it does favor the Seattle Sounders, because the Sounders have played a lot of tough games to begin the season, and when you play a lot of tough games to begin the season, eventually the schedule is going to be a little bit more favored toward them. And I think that their schedule, actually the next game they do play against the Galaxy on the road, and that also would be a really big test to see whether or not if the Sounders can remain unbeaten. But I think after that the schedule does get a little bit easier for them, and that's another reason why I think most likely they are going to be that team that is the last man standing, or the last team standing, in terms of the only team in the league to have yet to taste defeat. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think about both of these teams that is currently unbeaten, and also who do you think is going to be that last team that remains unbeaten in this season. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you guys do a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.